Hi Aaron, thanks for taking the time to make a video to us, it's much appreciated. Now, I'm going to go straight into my favorite point, the argument about disciples wouldn't die for a lie. First of all, I never said that martyrdom does not prove sincerity. I will say, and I did say, and please remember that sincerity does not make something true. You said that they live in an honor and shame society. I grant you that. I'm not even going to challenge you, even though I'm not sure if that's true. I'll grant you that. But since when did honor, shame exceed life? Yeah, I agree. Being shamed and exposed for being a liar is pretty darn embarrassing. But would you rather die to cover up the embarrassment? In other words, maybe they didn't lie, they were mistaken, and they would still be shamed for being wrong. Isn't it possible that they insisted on being right because they didn't want to admit they were wrong? You say, well, they died for it. Did they? What do we know about them dying for it? First of all, again, all we know is from 4 or 5 accounts. Not from them firsthand, obviously. If they died, they wouldn't be writing about themselves being killed. But what do we know about how they were persecuted? You quoted Paul saying that, well, if Christ didn't die and resurrect, then Christianity is pointless. That's nice, but from the persecutor's perspective, did they ever give the followers a chance to recant the resurrection story? Did they? Seriously. It's not enough for you to say they died until you can tell me that they were given the opportunity to recant this or that, and that could have saved their lives, and they either chose not to or they chose to. If they were not specifically asked about the resurrection story, you can't say they died specifically for that. It's possible that they were persecuted for 90% of Christianity, but 10% of Christianity, which they didn't care about, was probably okay, and they were persecuted and killed anyway because of everything else. You have a one-sided story, and that one-sided story isn't even that complete. When I brought up Alexis Reich, I didn't say that he didn't have motives. What I did say was that he did lie, with nothing to gain and prison sentence or a life to lose. Now, you automatically went ahead and assumed that he wanted media attention. How do you know that? Why is it okay for you to automatically assume that Alexis Reich had a motive, but the disciples do not? And that's based on lack of information. When you say they have an honor-shame society, great. Is it possible that they could have started out with a lie or a mistaken belief, but even when they were proven wrong, they were too ashamed to admit they were wrong and therefore denied they were wrong? When you say that they live in an honor-shame society, is it possible that they could have lied to save their lives? I mean, let's, for the sake of argument, say the resurrection was true, and like you said, nobody would die for a lie. But would somebody lie to live? Would somebody lie if they could get away with not getting caught that they were lying, and lie and deny the resurrection story and live? These are stories that just don't appear anywhere. So you basically use the lack of information or lack of evidence to support your story. That's not how logic, history, or supernatural claims work. It works perfect for a religion. If you just want to say, I want to believe it because the Bible says so and it gives my life meaning, fine. But don't try to hold this up to scrutiny and then make up all these excuses. I don't claim to read Alexis Reich's mind. I also don't claim to read the disciples' mind, and I'm really even willing to grant they existed. Why is it okay for you to say the disciples had no motives? Why is it okay for you to say they lived in such a society that lying isn't tolerated, so they couldn't lie? Why is it okay for you to say that Joseph Smith's followers, half of them left the church? What about the ones that stayed? How many people does it take to... How many people dying for what they believed, even if they did that, does it take for you to say, okay, I believe them? Note again, sincerity and something being true are entirely different. I don't doubt that if it were actually true that disciples actually were persecuted for specifically and nothing more, nothing less, believing the resurrection story, that they sincerely believed it. But I will not for a minute believe that just because they were sincere, that they are right, they couldn't be mistaken, they were telling the truth, and what they claimed to have happened actually happened. Because it is far more likely a person could be mistaken or misled, deluded, than a supernatural event. But, as you can see, you don't hold that same standard to all the other supernatural claims. I'm willing to hold that same standard to all second-hand claims, or claims that in history that are decades removed from the alleged event. Like I said to people, I'm willing to deny that Nero or Alexander the Great existed if all we have of them are writings that were decades after they died. The difference is that with Nero, we could ask who was the emperor at 50 AD, and Alexander the Great, we could ask who was the king of Macedonia in 330 BC. So, try that gap with Jesus. Do we have a Jesus gap that says, well, if Jesus didn't live from 1 to 36 AD, who did? Where was that empty seat that we need to fill? I don't think you have that, and that's the problem. I believe you have that empty seat if we were talking about Nero or Alexander the Great. I'm willing to be wrong. And again, I am willing to deny that Nero or Alexander the Great existed. That's the difference between you and I. I am willing to hold the same consistent position, whether you're talking about history or miracles, or cognitive dissonance and dying for a lie. You have not.